Hello, world. It's me, Dennis Tardan.
And I'm John Wright.
And as you can see, we are both two old white guys.
Dennis and I grew up in the same rural ranching community in South Texas. But over the last 50 years, our paths and our worldviews have diverged.
I adopted and have followed a liberal and progressive ideology.
And I adopted and followed a conservative and libertarian ideology. We are here to talk and to listen to one another and see where we might find common ground.
Or at least agree to disagree without being disagreeable. This is Two Old White Guys. Well, happy May the 6th, 2022, John.
Yes, Dennis.
Yes.
Happy May the 6th to you also.
Thank you.
I finally figured out what May the 4th be with you
Yes.
meant. I thought it was just, okay, but then it is May the 4th.
Yes.
Somebody.
Isn't it wonderful? Isn't it wonderful to have both of us at 74 to have cultural references that span almost 3/4 of a century?
Yes, but the problem is most of the people I talk to now don't have the slightest idea of what I'm talking about.
But how about, I used to go along the, I would judge how culturally relevant I was by how, whenever the music award show would come on, how many of the people that I knew, and gradually I would have heard of at least 80 or 90% of the bands, even if I hadn't heard of the music. But then I got down to about 50%. Now I neither know the bands nor the music nor the genre. So that's how far I've dropped out of the cultural relevance.
Well, I'll bring something to your attention.
Yes.
Garth Brooks was put on a conference at one of the big stadiums in, I think it was in New Orleans.
Yes.
And the audience was so loud, vociferous, and pounding and beat.
Yes.
That it was recorded on seismometers as a 4.5 earthquake.
Wow.
I just thought you might say that's bringing down the house.
That certainly is. And I hope that it wasn't the Superdome, the Louisiana Superdome. What is the dome in Louisiana? Anyway, I don't remember. Doesn't matter. Let's just hope everything is safe in Louisiana.
Is it as it should be?
So this is the week that was. You talked about this before. This was a television program. I believe David Frost was the host of it, correct?
I just remember TW3.
Yes.
And the discussions of sort of a farce if you want, or
yes.
Now that word has escaped. It was satire.
Yes, exactly.
What it was about the goings and the fallacies and failures and
exactly
things of life.
All right. So in this past week, what resonated with you here on May the 5th and the previous May the 6th in the previous week?
Well, when our discussion, you kept on our last episode.
Yes.
You kept saying, how can the democracy is under fault because 57% of the Republicans say that it was a stolen election.
Exactly. That they believe that they are living under that. So, and I asked you to do that because I wanted to know if you honestly believed that we were living under an illegitimate government. Would that not give, if you honestly believe that, would that not give you the right to extrajudicially do some things to try to take our democracy back?
If you can't take it back by correcting the foul, the false, the defects,
right?
Which is what the states have been doing. They're trying to tighten up so that the voting process once again is considered reliable.
So you think, all right, so it's considered reliable, but now that you have already, once you've broken something, because the election system, for 58% of the Republicans believe that the election system was broken. How do you rebuild that once you have lost the trust in the faith. If their candidate loses, what is anything to stop from that candidate saying, fair, I lost, we're done?
Well, one, they have not lost trust in the system. If they lost trust in the system, there would not be efforts made to attempt to correct what are the perceived and real shortcomings and what allowed for inappropriate ballot acceptance.
And I accept that, but with anything, John, don't we have to manage a certain amount of risk? Like, for example, we could really cut down. There are about over 40,000 people die every year on the highway. And that if we were to only to keep our speed limit at 25 miles an hour, we would certainly reduce that, right?
No. Let me tell you, I don't know. Well, you should recall when the speed limit was reduced to 55.
Yes.
All over the world, well, in the United States.
Right.
The calculations were that the number of people whose lives were saved
yes.
by the slower speed used more fuel and more energy
yes.
than they did if they'd just been allowed to drive at 60 miles an hour.
Right.
It was sort of an Orwellian event.
Right.
Unintended consequences, which we see so often.
And that's what I'm asking about this. What may be the unintended consequences of these these attempts to deal with both real and perceived, because both of those things you have in there is a perception of voter fraud that is being addressed. And there is, according to some of the people that are writing these laws, actual voter fraud that occurred. I don't see the evidence. I have not seen the evidence as far as within courts, all the way up to the Supreme Court. I have not seen the evidence of wide-scale voter fraud. Have you?
I don't know whether you say you have not seen or you won't see.
Oh, I will. No, I will see. One of the things that you've done for me, John, is that you've asked me to read. There's a book called Wokenomics, and so I'm about halfway through the book, and I'm understanding some of the perceptions of what putting corporate responsibility and having it to be what should a corporation do in order to be a good citizen? And what are the kinds of practices that they do? And is this damaging? And so I'm working through that book. So the same thing I want to say here is that if there is voter fraud at the scale that would actually cause these laws to be enacted, what are the unintended consequences of these laws being in there? Who is being cut out or made harder to exercise their legal vote in order for these laws to be in there?
That's the trick, isn't it?
Yes.
And that is what we must have relative confidence in the people that we have elected in this democracy.
Yes.
To carry out the desires of the people. And also to ensure that our elections are respected.
Right.
You don't want to see a 99% vote like Putin got. Well, actually, right. Putin, I think the last election got 100%. But like everything, the point I was trying to make when I went back to the riots, I mean, we could talk about this ad nauseam. What it amounts to is we've elected our representatives. And there has been a perception or an actual existence. Now, as I said before last week, right. The fact that the fraud that was identifiable or felt to be identifiable was about 7 million votes. That would not have changed the election.
Right. So it said felt to be. But whether that can be proven or not is what I'm asking, is that if we can find the proof, 7 million, in order to pull 7 million votes, to have 7 million votes changed is a massive enterprise. Some evidence of that would have to be, like, for example, when the Pangea, when all the continents were together, and then slowly they've had the continental plates, you can see where South America fits perfectly right into Africa. So there's evidence there. There's evidence of it happening. So what I'm asking is that where is that a rational person, or a rational, or a court or whatever, because somebody has perpetrated, if 7 million votes 7 million votes have been were changed, somebody has perpetrated a massive fraud. And if they can do 7 million, I cannot imagine how they could not do it again.
Well, getting rid of ballot harvesting is probably the best way. Did you, and
that word,
it actually just got released. It got released today.
Yeah.
Denise de Souza's 2,000 Mules, where he documents, and I mean, he's got the surveillance cameras of the same person going to different areas and throwing ballots in, ballot harvesting, which in Georgia, by the way, is illegal.
Yeah.
But they had the ballot drop boxes.
Yes.
They weren't monitored other than the surveillance camera. And you see the same guy showing up at, I don't know, there's like 43 polling places.
Right.
Stuffing the boxes with ballots.
Yes.
There are other things.
Was that illegal? Was that an illegal act?
Yes.
Okay.
Harvesting ballots is illegal.
Who is this man, and how has he been charged?
He is identified on the film. I haven't seen the document. All I've seen are trailers of the documentary. It's just released today. It's 2,000 Mules.
And what I'm asking is, as you find this out and we find where this man is, who this man is.
He was in Atlanta, Georgia. We know that.
I understand that. But what I'm asking is that he had to get ballots. Those ballots had to be filled out. If he's harvesting ballots, and those ballots, first of all, they had to have all the state coding on it. So they had to be somehow fraudulently made, because each ballot has its own number on it, has an individual number, and those numbers can be checked against the numbers in the database, right? Every vote has its own individual number on it, so that they'll know, they can match that against whether or not that was an actual legal ballot or whether or not that was a counterfeit ballot.
They wouldn't be counterfeit. They simply got a bunch of ballots and had them filled out.
So they went around to people, asked them for their ballots, or they went in, they mailed them. I mean, think about how if we're going to talk about a 7 million vote enterprise, something massive has to happen. Think about that. Think about what would happen. 7 million, John.
187 million or whatever that cast votes. 7 million is a piddling amount.
But in order to get those 7 million, in order to get those 7 million votes, you have to have some kind of a concerted effort to do that. How do you pull something like that off?
Well, it's the same way that the Duke of Duval pulled his control off for all the years. Not quite as sophisticated, but the shoestring.
Yeah, but that was I understand that, but that was in one county. We are talking about 7 million votes across
a state.
7 million votes in one state?
In Georgia.
7 million votes in Georgia. Now that has to be the story of the century. How that is not, if that is true, John, you are dealing with, I cannot believe that there isn't a reporter who is just absolutely after it all over.
Dennis. How many riots that BLM, Antifa, in the woke cities occurred last year?
Quite a few.
578
riots.
Billions of dollars in property damage, thousands of injuries, deaths accordingly, looting, pillaging, and the looting is still going on in the woke cities. Where's the news? Where are ABC, NBC, CBS MSNBC, CNN, where are they?
Where is Sinclair? Sinclair Broadcasting and Fox News both have very strong presences. Why are they not covering this?
They have covered it.
Well, then there you go. Then the information is out there. Why?
No,
I mean, why?
Because if you've
Tucker
ever heard,
Carlson has the largest cable audience.
Hannity.
Alone. I mean, Sean Hannity has the largest cable audience.
Yes.
Tucker Carlson's right up there with him, and they have the largest audience. Why?
And let's not forget the number one nighttime show is Gutfeld.
Right. And how is he covering it?
It's exciting. I mean, it's looked at a fact, and they're on to the other things. It happened. Why wasn't it just like the 800? You know, when $800 million, Cuomo's wife was in charge of the mental health program, right, and $800 million is unaccounted for. Now, you ask me, you said with this righteous indignation,
yes,
that somebody should do something or prove it.
Somebody should, and she should.
Yeah, they should, but are they? No.
Why not? Why? Because every single lieutenant governor in New York has gone to jail over the last few years. They've gone to jail. I don't know. However, she should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I do not know, and I don't understand how, when you talk about woke, how does woke combine with lawlessness? Those two things don't, to me, why are they so tied?
Because the woke cities, these are the ones, the acute aware of racial and social injustice, which is the definition of woke,
yes, is
where the riots occurred. Woke has supported the actions to defund the police, BLM, Antifas. And I think the irony
now, wait a minute. I don't want to talk Antifas because I don't mind at all talking about Black Lives Matter, but because they're a real organization, and we're talking about. But here's the thing. I want to play Russian judge with you. Okay, let's do this. Let's throw out the high and the low. Let's throw out on the left and the right. There are the crazies that are just out there, and Antifa. While I'm sure that there are some people that believe in the anti-fascist movement that are so much that they want to be able to do, but my experience within the Democratic Party and the work that I have experienced is that whomever they are, they don't show up, and they're very much at the far end. And the same way, the Madison Cawthorns and the Matt Gaetz and the Margie Taylor Greens and the Lauren Boeberts are the crazies on the right. I won't talk about them. Let's talk about this huge middle, this big 80% of the middle of something that we can do something about. Let's talk about them. Let's talk about this area where we can do something about, rather than talking about Antifa. So Black Lives Matter, absolutely.
Okay. Black Lives Matter only if it's a policeman that shoots a black person.
Really?
How many black on black, how many people in Chicago are murdered every year?
Yes.
And they are black.
Yes.
Now, they're not shot by police. It's black on black crime.
Right.
Now, whatever her damn name is.
May I ask? Let me ask you something. Would you be surprised if there were a greater homicides per capita in Texas than there is in Illinois?
I would really want to see
gun violence. I'm talking about gun
violence. Oh, hell yeah.
More per capita.
I would like to see the data, but it would not surprise me because you're looking at one city. Most of the violence that you have in Illinois is in one city.
Right. And when we talk about that kind of violence, how would you approach it? If you, I mean, you and I are white men. You and I grew up during the times of Jim Crow. You and I have seen went through the civil rights movement from the white male privileged side of the equation. We had that. We don't know what it's like. Do you know what it? Can you imagine what it's like to be pulled over driving while black? Can you imagine what would go through your mind?
I know what it's like. My one of my best friends is an Hispanic. He is a CRNA, and he owns or at the time, he owned a very nice high dollar car.
Yeah.
He would always come out for the weekends on our land because we like to shoot at targets. We like to shoot in general. He would come racing through this one town on the way from Houston and invariably get stopped and invariably get pulled out. And he'd come back in just pissed off at everything. And I said, well, look, you know that this town has got has got a department that aren't exactly they appear to have a bias against Hispanics or even blacks. Right. Don't know.
Sure.
So it is probably better to understand that these people are there, and it would do better if you just kind of put your foot off the gas and just drive. Don't come ripping through there at 90 miles an hour and not expect the sheriff to pull up. And, a Hispanic with a high power, with a big car and lots of guns, they start thinking drugs. Because if you recall, that was in and around the time, as I recall, that the deputy DPS people were getting shot by drug dealers when they made car stops. So I can tell you, Vidor, the place where the guy was lynched, I wouldn't stay in Vidor at night. That has got to be one of the most backward, ridiculous. I have nothing but absolute disgust for that city and the people in it.
But imagine you're black. Imagine
if I were black.
Can you understand the difference between how a black, I mean, can you empathize at all?
Yeah, because I wouldn't stay in Vidor and I'm white.
I understand that, but I'm asking on general on how people perceive you differently, how people perceive you walking around a store, walking into a store, trying on clothes, doing that, how they might perceive you differently because you are a white male than they do if you were a black male. Can you empathize or at all understand what that might feel like?
How it feels is an individual response. What it looks like is the same. I know you remember Trayvon Martin.
I do.
Geraldo Rivera, in his comments about it, said, I warn my son not to walk around in a hoodie because it's an attention thing. I mean, you see a bunch of people in a hoodie.
Right.
Now, there was a book in the 50s, if you recall, Black Like Me.
Yes.
The guy dyed his skin and went out to experience firsthand what it was like to be black, trying to get into hotels and stuff. And I mean, his conclusion was, yeah, there is a racial racism or racial bias. The movie where the guy wants to get into college, but he can't qualify for a white college, so he dyes his hair, similar to Black Like Me. He goes to school as a black guy. The answer of both those men at the end, of those individuals at the end, is what I think you're getting at. James Earl Jones was the dean of students, and when it all came out that this guy was white and he had been black, or he had been trying to pass as black. James Earl Jones says, well, do you think you see how it is to be a black man? And the boy said, no, because I go home, I take the dye off, I'm not black.
Right.
You go home, you're black.
Yes.
And it all, anti-Semitism.
Yes.
The Hispanic, the Zoot Suiters in the 40s.
Yes.
It was all based on a group. Right now, the hip hop crowd, the gangsters, they are all putting themselves apart and holding themselves up. The whole, whatever it is, survival rate, or what am I trying to say? The mechanism of survival or the method of survival is assimilation. When the Irish came here, Irish need not apply.
Exactly. And you Jews, remember when you were going to school as a child, children were punished for speaking Spanish.
That is correct.
There was a punishment. They were actually punished for speaking Spanish.
And it was a misguided attempt, very much like the the Aboriginal Americans, where they, in the 1870s or so, took them aside,
yes,
cut their hair, and
absolutely,
put them in
and separated them from their families, sent them to Indian schools, and that was what
it was a misguided effort,
right,
at assimilation.
Exactly.
People have to want to be assimilated. They want to assimilate into that culture.
Right.
But there's always the caveat. You set yourself apart. You refuse to assimilate into the majority of culture. You're setting yourself up for different treatment. I want to know why the blacks are so pissed off at the Asians. And the current lawsuits are Asians suing Harvard and University of North Dakota, and Harvard especially, because they have a very strict policy, which the Asians claim takes
seats away from them. So
right, it deprives them of the rights of others.
Exactly.
So it's not the whites with affirmative action, although I would really ask people, what has affirmative action accomplished in 60 years or so that it's been present?
I don't know. Are you in favor of there being? I prefer to. I like to look at demographics. Like, one of the things that I'm concerned about in our culture is that we have that very few senators are now controlling that represent a very small percentage of the population. Like, Wyoming has 2 senators and 1 representative.
Well, because the Constitution says.
I understand that, but the Constitution also says that that blacks are only 3/5.
No, it doesn't, Dennis. Dennis, we're going to go through this again. For purposes,
it says that only men have the right to vote. Only white propertied men have the right to vote.
No, the Constitution the Constitution was corrected by the amendment that extended first voting rights to all people, regardless of race, and then included gender. Yes. So you're sitting there saying the Constitution only gives...
No, all right, so those two. So I'm saying I want an amendment that changes that. I would like to have an amendment that changes it to we are based upon our population, that the Senate also is based upon population too. No, I'm sorry, I have not, John, I have not thought this out. This is to me is absolute solipsism on my part, and I apologize because I have not thought out
let me think out for you
better.
The founding fathers knew there was going to be always a question between the largely populated states,
right,
and those that did not have as many people,
right,
and they did not want a dominance over all the states because that is a source of friction.
Yes.
And it can result in war.
Exactly.
So they said, okay, in regards to money, we're going to have a bicameral legislator. Money and bills regarding finances and taxation arise in the House because that's where the population, that represents all of the people, and they're going to be affected.
Yes.
But as a balance against the populism, you have the Senate, which is a deliberative body, and are more inclined, well, they used to be more inclined to look at the information that was put there or even bring out bills and to discuss in a calm, forthright manner.
Right.
The advantages, disadvantages, try to undo the unforeseen circumstances. That was the founding.
That was the founding. And do you feel that we have moved away from that?
Well, I feel that people think they should but that's because they're ignorant.
Do you feel that we have moved away from that? Do you feel that there is still discourse and a reasonable discourse and the kinds of conversation that you're talking about happening right now in the Senate?
Oh, heavens, there's nowhere that kind of discourse and reason. Everything is based on political desires, political aspirations, and position. Mm-hmm. The Constitution is being trampled in this regard. That pulls us back on the real 600-pound gorilla, mm-hmm. is all the brouhaha that the woke and the I call them feminazis, but these people that heard, they got the copy. I know you're aware of it, of the possibility that the Supreme Court has considered negating Roe versus Wade.
No, it has not. They have voted.
No.
They have voted in that draft. They have voted in the draft. And this is what I want to do. Would you be willing to have in the next few days a conversation specifically on that issue?
Only if you read Roe versus Wade. Read the bill. Mm-hmm. Ruth Bader Ginsburg
was against it. I agree.
She was against Roe versus Wade.
Exactly.
And you know why?
Because it should have been based on the 14th Amendment, not upon privacy.
There is no constitutional guarantee for abortion.
Privacy. I agree.
It was a bad law. And right now, the possible reversal, which is what's causing all of this insanity, is not saying, that they're rising up and saying, well, abortions are over. No, it's the one case that's being argued is the case of Mississippi that places a 15-week limit on abortion.
Right.
And they base this on whatever evidence, clinical evidence of viability.
And in that draft, what did Alito and the other four justices rule? What did they rule?
They thought that Roe versus Wade was egregious,
and
it was a violation, and that the choice of abortion, if Congress wants to make it
exactly, they're the ones that have to do
codify
it, and they have to turn it back to the states.
That's right, because there is no law that says there is no federal law in the Constitution.
Exactly.
Now, and the rules of the Constitution, if the power is not specifically given to the federal government.
Exactly. It belongs to the states.
It belongs to the states.
Right.
Now, there are 20 states right now that have bills in waiting, similar to the Mississippi bill.
Exactly. They are either they're waiting to be triggered the minute the minute it comes out, that they will be instantly triggered.
And that means there's 30 states that permit abortion and may continue abortion. If you look at the population, something like 50, well, I'm hearing people talking 57 now, but the people that I really was listening to originally, I said it's something like 49% are pro-life, 47% or
No, pro-choice or anti-choice. Frame it that way. They are
no,
either
wrong,
pro-choice or
wrong,
anti-choice.
wrong,
Wrong,
wrong.
wrong, wrong. I won't let you get away with that because
And
you're
I'm not going
either.
to let you get away with even the
It's
lie,
not
Dennis.
pro-life. Pro-life means that pro-life means that when the baby that it doesn't life does not end at birth. If you're going to make sure that someone is going to carry that baby and you're going to force them to carry that baby to be able to go through, you're a doctor. You're an actual medical
Absolutely. I'm
doctor.
a doctor.
And you know what it does to a body and the kind of risks that there are. Not only that, not only physically, but emotionally and economically that it is to be able to carry a child.
And
over
abortion
60%
carries the same
over,
emotional destruction. Now, let's go back to what you said. And I forgot what you said. That's
over 60% of the women that got abortions last year in Texas had more than one child, had multiple children when they had over 60%.
Mm-hmm. And there's certainly other means. I can, the one person I came closest, he was a black boy, and I came very close to calling him that pejorative. He was 19 years old. He'd fathered 7 children by 5 different women, and he was bragging that he hadn't paid a penny in child support. Now,
that's awful.
It is awful. And you know what really I think is awful? There's 2 women out of the 5 that went and had another kid with him.
Okay. When we talk that, it's because we've got to talk about what do you feel, is it your opinion, John, that this person, this young man is an aberration, or is he part of a culture and part of something that has a racial dynamic to it? Because that's what it sounds like.
He's a part of a subset, because I have been exposed to whites, browns, blacks, all that carry the same concepts of impregnation. And one of the coaches, and I think I've told you this before, at Stroman High School here, that his wife was a PA, and I would talk to him.
Mm-hmm.
And I did the sports medicine for Stroman. He said, in this group, in this culture or this social strata,
mm-hmm.
You're not considered a man unless you father a child.
Exactly.
And you're not considered a woman unless you bear a child.
Exactly. And that is within that. But, well, that's what I'm going to want to talk about, John. This is what I want to, these issues about not only where we are, but where we are as a culture and what can be done about it. Because if you're going to say that this is since we both agree that there are strong economic pressures that are making this more of a challenge for people in poorer sections than there are for the people in the wealthier sections. Would you agree with that? Would you agree that poverty is an element of this?
With what?
An element of the kind of behavior and what we're doing. Would you say that poverty is an element within propagating that kind of behavior?
I have my doubts about that, because all of the kids, strong Baptist kids, that were caught screwing in the parking lot of the Baptist church during their youth ministry meetings. It has nothing to do specifically with race, although there may be more opportunity in some. But I have seen as ridiculous behavior pattern in all races.
Thank you. So we can just talk about the ridiculous patterns and then try it again at another time. Why don't we do that, John? Why don't you sign us off on this?
Well, I tell you
episode?
One more thing, Dennis. Have you ever participated in an abortion?
No. I have participated in a vasectomy.
Well, that's good. Did you wear a tuxedo?
No, but you have participated in an abortion.
In medical school, I was probably held your viewpoint that, and it's not called a fetus. It's not called an infant. It's called a product of conception,
Mm-hmm.
which simply goes to depersonalize what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
But I had no particular observation, no preconceived notions. Yes, I knew there were people that argued one way, argued the other, but I was an
Right.
enlightened, brilliant person. So I had the medical students were allowed to opt out of abortion participation if it,
Mm-hmm.
violated their
Sure.
religious precepts, if it violated whatever they want.
Yes.
I was present at 4 abortions. After the 4th one, when I was looking at the POC, product of conception, and saw a perfectly formed human being,
Mm-hmm.
After much soul searching,
Mm-hmm.
I had to admit that I committed or assisted in the murder of 4 human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I went to the chief and said,
Mm-hmm.
I can't go through any
Do
more
this
of this.
anymore.
And that has
Mm-hmm.
been my position
Mm-hmm.
since my junior year in medical school.
Mm-hmm.
Now, are you trying to tell me that's all the time we have now?
That's all the time we have now.
So until the next time, remember, you can't learn if you won't listen.
Thank you, John. And I promise to keep listening. We'll see
Bye.
everybody next time.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.